The cold didn't arrive all at once. It crept in quietly, seeping through the thin cotton of my nightgown, biting my skin in small, cruel reminders that I didn't belong out there. Welcome to my channel. If you're watching this on Facebook, don't forget to follow the page. And if you're watching on YouTube, make sure to subscribe to the channel. If you enjoyed the story, let me know in the comments below. You can also share your thoughts from the heart in the comments, so I can create more stories based on what you love. Thank you for your support. The porch light above me flickered, casting uneven shadows across the snow-dusted steps. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked once and then fell silent, as if even it knew this wasn't a night for noise. I stood barefoot on the frozen concrete, my arms wrapped tightly around myself, trying to keep what little warmth I had left. My breath came out in short, shaky clouds. Each exhale felt heavier than the last, like my lungs were filling with ice. Inside the house behind me, everything was still. Too still. Just minutes ago, the walls had been alive with shouting. Words thrown like broken glass. Accusations, insults, threats that landed hard and deep. Now there was nothing. No footsteps. No voices. Just the locked door between me and the life I thought I understood. I knocked once. Then again. The sound felt weak, almost embarrassed, swallowed by the winter night. "Please," I whispered, though I wasn't sure who I was talking to anymore. Him? Myself? God? No answer came. I stepped back from the door, my teeth chattering uncontrollably. The street stretched out in front of me, long and empty, lined with houses that looked warm and safe and impossibly far away. Yellow lights glowed behind curtains. Televisions flickered. Somewhere, people were laughing. Living. I wasn't supposed to be here. I pressed my palms against my arms, rubbing hard, trying to bring blood back into my fingers. They felt numb already, stiff and clumsy. Fear settled in my chest, heavy and sharp. Not the kind that makes you scream, but the kind that makes you think too clearly, too fast. If I stayed out here, I could get sick. Or worse. I glanced at the window beside the door. The glass reflected my face back at me, pale, eyes too wide, hair loose and tangled around my shoulders. I barely recognized the woman staring back. For a brief moment, a dangerous thought crossed my mind. I could break it. The idea shocked me with its clarity. One hard strike. Just enough to shatter the glass. I could reach in, unlock the window, get inside. Warmth. Safety. Familiar walls. My hand lifted slowly, fingers curling into a fist. And then I heard it. The soft creak of a door opening next door. I froze, my fist still raised, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure it could be heard down the block. I turned my head toward the sound. The neighbor's porch light clicked on. She stepped out carefully, wrapped in a thick coat that looked older than me, a wool scarf pulled tight around her neck. Snow crunched under her slippers as she moved. Her hair was silver, pulled back neatly, and her face, lined and gentle, showed no surprise, only concern. She looked at me for a long second, taking in my bare feet, my thin nightgown, the way I was shaking. "Oh, sweetheart," she said softly. Her voice was calm, steady, like she'd seen storms before and knew how to wait them out. I lowered my hand slowly, shame burning hotter than the cold. I hadn't meant for anyone to see me like this. Exposed. Weak. Unwanted. I'm sorry, I said automatically, the words slipping out of habit. "I didn't mean to disturb you." She frowned, not at me, but past me, toward the dark house behind me. "You're not disturbing anyone," she said. "You're freezing." She stepped closer, close enough that I could smell clean laundry and something faintly floral. Without asking, she draped a heavy shawl over my shoulders. The fabric was warm, almost painfully so, and my body reacted immediately, a shudder running through me as tears stung my eyes. "I can't," I started, but my voice cracked, betraying me. "You can," she replied gently. "And you will." She took my arm, her grip surprisingly firm for someone her age, and guided me toward her house. I hesitated, looking back once at the door I'd been locked out of. It looked smaller now. Meaner. The neighbor noticed my glance. "Leave it," she said quietly. "It'll still be there in the morning." Her house was only a few steps away, but by the time we reached her porch, my legs felt weak. She opened the door and warm air rushed out, wrapping around me like a promise. Inside, the house smelled of soup and old books. A small lamp glowed in the living room, casting soft light over crocheted blankets and framed photographs lining the walls. The quiet here was different, peaceful, not threatening. She helped me sit on the couch, then disappeared briefly, returning with a thick blanket and a mug that steamed invitingly. "Drink," she said, pressing it into my hands. Slowly. The mug was hot. Almost too hot. I cradled it carefully, letting the warmth sink into my fingers. My hands trembled so badly the liquid rippled inside. She sat across from me, watching without staring, giving me space while still being present. It made something inside me loosen, just a little. "I'm Mrs. Harris," she said after a moment. "Though everyone just calls me Evelyn." I hesitated. My name felt fragile, like saying it out loud might break it. "I'm fine." She raised an eyebrow, not unkindly. "No, you're not," she said. "But that's okay. You don't have to explain anything tonight." I swallowed hard, my throat tight. The kindness in her voice was almost unbearable. It had been a long time since anyone had spoken to me like that. Minutes passed. Or maybe longer. Time felt strange, stretched thin by exhaustion and shock. Gradually, the feeling returned to my toes, painful pins and needles that made me wince. Evelyn noticed and adjusted the blanket, tucking it around my feet. "Thank you," I whispered. She smiled, a small, knowing smile. "You can stay here tonight," she said. "No arguments." I opened my mouth to protest, but the words died before they could form. I was too tired. Too cold. Too empty. She stood and moved toward the hallway. "Get some rest," she added. "Tomorrow is a new day." As she turned to leave the room, she paused, her hand resting on the door frame. "And tomorrow," she said calmly, as if stating a simple fact, "things will look very different." I watched her go, the sound of her footsteps fading down the hall. Alone on the couch, wrapped in warmth, I stared at the ceiling, listening to the quiet hum of the house. Outside, the wind howled faintly, rattling the windows. Inside, for the first time in a long while, I felt safe enough to close my eyes. I didn't know what morning would bring, but something told me it would not be what he expected. I woke up slowly, the way you do when your body isn't sure it's safe yet. For a moment, I didn't know where I was. The ceiling above me was unfamiliar, cream-colored, with a faint crack running along one corner like a thin lightning bolt frozen in time. The air felt warm. Too warm to be real. I stayed still, afraid that if I moved, the cold would rush back in and I'd realize this was just another cruel trick of my mind. But the warmth stayed. A soft ticking sound reached my ears. A clock. Steady. Patient. Alive. I turned my head slightly. The couch beneath me was narrow but comfortable, layered with blankets that smelled faintly of soap and something comforting I couldn't name. My nightgown was still on, but someone had tucked another blanket around my shoulders during the night. My feet were warm. That alone felt like a miracle. Then everything came back at once. The argument. The shouting. The door locking behind me. The cold biting into my skin. The window. My raised fist. My chest tightened, and I sucked in a sharp breath, my heart beginning to race. "It's okay," a voice said gently from nearby. "You're safe." I flinched, then relaxed when I saw Evelyn sitting in the armchair across the room. She was dressed neatly, as if it were already late morning, her gray hair smoothed back, glasses perched low on her nose. A book rested in her lap, closed now, forgotten. "You scared me for a second," she added with a small smile. "You were breathing like you were running." "I'm sorry," I said automatically, then stopped myself. The word felt heavy. Worn out. She seemed to notice. "No need for that," she said. "Not here." I pushed myself upright slowly, the blanket slipping down to my waist. My body felt stiff, sore in places I hadn't noticed the night before. Emotional pain has a way of masking physical discomfort until it's ready to be felt. "What time is it?" I asked. "Just after 8, she replied. "Just after 8, she replied. "I figured I'd let you sleep. You needed it." 8. On any normal day, he would already be awake, showered, dressed, coffee brewing, moving through the house with that sharp, impatient energy that made everything feel tense before the sun even fully rose. The thought made my stomach twist. Evelyn watched my face carefully, the way someone does when they're trying to understand a story without interrupting it. "There's coffee," she said, nodding toward the kitchen. "And some toast. Nothing fancy, but it'll do." "That's more than enough," I said quietly. She stood and moved toward the kitchen, her movement steady but slow, as if she were careful with her energy. I followed, wrapping the blanket tighter around myself. The kitchen was small and bright, sunlight streaming in through lace curtains. A kettle sat on the stove, still warm. The table held 2 plates, one with toast, the other with a simple bowl of oatmeal. She gestured for me to sit. "Eat," she said. "Then we'll talk. Or we won't. Whatever you need." I sat, my hands wrapped around a mug of coffee she placed in front of me. The smell alone made my eyes sting. I hadn't realized how hungry I was until my stomach growled softly in protest. Evelyn pretended not to hear it. I took a bite of toast. Then another. Each mouthful grounded me a little more, pulling me back into my body, into the present moment. After a few minutes, she sat across from me. "Do you want to tell me what happened?" she asked gently. I stared into my coffee. The surface was dark and still, reflecting a distorted version of my face. "I don't even know where to start," I said. She nodded. "Then don't start at the beginning. Start at the part that hurts the most." The words caught me off guard. My throat tightened. The way he looked at me, I said after a long pause. Like I was nothing. Like I was in the way. Evelyn didn't interrupt. She didn't rush me. She just listened. "He wasn't always like this," I continued, my voice low. Or maybe he was, and I just didn't see it. He used to laugh more. He used to ask me how my day was. Somewhere along the way, that stopped. I swallowed hard. Last night was bad, I admitted. But it wasn't the first time. Just the coldest. She exhaled slowly, sadness flickering across her face. "No one deserves to be treated like that," she said firmly. "No one." I nodded, though a part of me still argued otherwise. Old habits die hard. There was a brief silence before she spoke again. "My son," she said, casually, as if discussing the weather, "works with your husband." My heart skipped. I looked up sharply. "What?" She met my gaze calmly. "He's his supervisor. Has been for years." My pulse quickened, a mix of confusion and something else I didn't want to name yet. "You don't need to worry," she added quickly. "I'm not saying this to scare you. I just want you to know that I'm not powerless here." Powerless. The word echoed in my mind. I had felt powerless for so long that I'd started to believe it was just who I was. Evelyn reached across the table and placed her hand over mine. Her skin was warm, her grip steady. "You didn't do anything wrong," she said. "And you're not alone, even if it feels that way." A tear slipped free despite my efforts to hold it back. Then another. Soon, I was crying quietly, shoulders shaking as years of unspoken fear and shame poured out. She didn't shush me. She didn't tell me to be strong. She just sat there, holding my hand, letting me break in a safe place. When the tears finally slowed, exhaustion settled in. "I don't know what to do," I admitted. "If I go back?" "You don't have to decide anything today," she interrupted gently. "Today is about getting through today." I nodded, grateful for the simplicity of that idea. Outside, I heard a car start. Then, another. The world was waking up. Evelyn stood and began rinsing the mugs at the sink. "He'll notice you're gone," she said quietly, not looking at me. "That usually happens sooner or later." My stomach clenched. "What if he comes here?" She turned, meeting my eyes. "If he does," she said calmly, "he won't like what he hears." There was something in her voice then, something firm, unmovable. It wasn't anger. It was certainty. I believed her. As the morning stretched on, I sat by the window, watching the snow slowly melt into slush along the curb. Each passing minute felt like borrowed time. I knew one thing for certain. By the end of this day, nothing would be the same. And somewhere, just across the yard, a man who thought he held all the control was about to learn how wrong he was. The knock came just after noon. It wasn't loud, not aggressive, just firm enough to announce itself without asking permission. Still, the sound sliced through me like a blade. My spine went rigid, and my heart slammed hard against my ribs. Evelyn, who had been folding laundry at the dining table, didn't even flinch. "Sit," she said calmly, not looking up. "I'll handle it." I stayed where I was, perched on the edge of the couch, my hands clenched together so tightly my fingers ached. My eyes were fixed on the front door, every instinct screaming at me to run, to hide, to disappear. The knock came again. This time a little sharper. Evelyn rose slowly, smoothing her cardigan as she walked. Her movements were unhurried, deliberate. She opened the door just enough to step into the doorway, blocking the view inside. I couldn't see him from where I sat, but I didn't need to. I knew that posture. The weight of his presence. The way the air seemed to tense around him. "Where is she?" he demanded. His voice carried clearly through the house, familiar and ugly in its confidence. My stomach twisted. Evelyn's voice, by contrast, was calm. Almost pleasant. "She's safe," she said. "That's all you need to know right now." There was a pause. I imagined his jaw tightening, his lips pressing into that thin line he wore when things didn't go his way. "This is between me and my wife," he snapped. "You have no right to keep her here." Evelyn didn't raise her voice. When a woman is put out in the cold in the middle of the night, she replied evenly, "It stops being just between husband and wife." Another pause. Longer this time. I held my breath. "You don't know the whole story," he said finally. "I know enough," Evelyn answered. Her words landed with quiet finality. There was movement at the door. I heard the faint creak of wood as he shifted his weight, likely trying to see past her, into the house. My pulse raced. "If she comes out," he said, his tone changing smoother now, controlled, "we can talk like adults." Evelyn's response was immediate. "She won't be doing anything she doesn't want to do." Something in her voice must have struck a nerve, because his restraint cracked. "You're making a mistake," he said sharply. "This will cost her. You're filling her head with nonsense." Evelyn sighed softly. "No," she said. "You did that all on your own." Silence fell again, thick and heavy. I imagined his face reddening, the way his eyes darkened when he felt challenged. Then, unexpectedly, Evelyn spoke again. "My son will be calling you this afternoon," she said. "I suggest you answer." That did it. "What?" he said, the words sharp, confused. "He's your supervisor," she continued, still calm. "And he doesn't like surprises. Especially not ones that involve his employees behaving poorly." The air seemed to shift. I couldn't see him, but I could feel the sudden loss of control rolling off him in waves. The man who had always spoken with authority now sounded uncertain. "You can't," he began. "I can," Evelyn interrupted. "And I have." Another long pause followed. This one felt different. He was recalculating. Replaying last night in his head, seeing it now through someone else's eyes. "This isn't over," he muttered. Evelyn leaned slightly forward. "It is for today," she said. "You should go." There was a beat. Then the sound of footsteps retreating. Heavy. Fast. The door closed gently. Only when the lock clicked did I realize I'd been holding my breath. I let it out in a shaky rush, my hands trembling. Evelyn turned and looked at me. Her expression softened immediately. "He's gone," she said. "For now." My legs felt weak as I stood. "Thank you," I whispered. The words felt inadequate, too small for what she'd just done. She waved it off lightly. "Sit. You look like you might faint." I did as she said. A few minutes passed in silence. The clock ticked. The house settled. Then Evelyn's phone rang. She glanced at the screen and nodded to herself. "That'll be my son." She answered, her tone warm but businesslike. She didn't say much, just listened, occasionally murmuring a quiet response. I caught fragments. "Yes. I understand. No, that won't be necessary. She's with me." When she hung up, she looked at me with a thoughtful expression. "He's furious," she said. "Not at you. At the situation." My chest tightened. "What does that mean?" "It means," she replied carefully, "that actions have consequences." The words sent a strange mix of relief and fear through me. Consequences had always felt like something that applied only to me. What happens now? I asked. Evelyn sat across from me again, folding her hands in her lap. Now, she said, you start thinking about what you want your life to look like when you're no longer walking on eggshells. The idea felt unreal. Dangerous, even. I don't know how, I admitted. She smiled gently. That's okay. You don't have to know everything today. You just have to know this: last night wasn't your fault. I nodded slowly, letting the truth of it sink in. Outside, the sky had cleared. Sunlight reflected off the melting snow, bright and blinding. It felt symbolic in a way I didn't quite trust yet. Somewhere down the street, a phone was ringing, and a man who had always believed he was untouchable was starting to realize just how fragile his power really was. The afternoon stretched on in a way that felt unfamiliar to me. There was no shouting, no sharp footsteps pacing the floor, no tension coiled tight in every corner of the room. Just quiet. The kind of quiet that lets your thoughts speak louder than you'd like. I sat by the window again, watching the last of the snow retreat into thin, dirty lines along the edge of the road. Cars passed occasionally. People went about their lives, unaware that something inside me had cracked open and refused to close again. Evelyn moved through the house with soft purpose. She cooked a simple lunch, humming under her breath, as if this were any other day. As if she hadn't just stood toe-to-toe with a man who believed fear was his strongest weapon. I wondered how many times she'd had to be brave in her own life. How many storms she'd already weathered to stand this steady now. She placed a bowl of soup in front of me and sat across the table. You haven't eaten much, she said gently. I don't feel hungry, I replied. She nodded, as if she'd expected that. Eat anyway. Your body's been running on fear. It needs something solid. I lifted the spoon and obeyed. The soup was warm and simple, grounding. Each bite made the room feel a little more real. After a while, she spoke again. My son told me something interesting, she said. My heart skipped. About him? Yes, she said. About how he's been behaving at work. I stiffened. He's been on thin ice for months, she continued calmly. Missed deadlines. Short temper. Complaints from coworkers. Last night wasn't an isolated incident. I stared down at my bowl. Part of me felt vindicated. Another part felt guilty for feeling that way. I didn't know, I murmured. Of course you didn't, Evelyn replied. People like him are very good at keeping their world separate. The words settled heavy in my chest. What did your son say? I asked quietly. He said he's scheduled a meeting, she answered. A serious one. My fingers tightened around the spoon. Is he going to lose his job? Evelyn studied me carefully before responding. That depends, she said, on whether he takes responsibility or tries to blame everyone else. I knew the answer to that without needing to hear it. Silence fell between us again. Not uncomfortable this time, just thoughtful. Later, Evelyn insisted I take a shower. She handed me a clean robe and fresh towels, all neatly folded. You'll feel better, she said, even if just a little. Standing under the hot water, I finally let myself breathe. The steam filled the small bathroom, fogging the mirror, blurring my reflection until I was just a shape, not a woman defined by bruises you couldn't see. I closed my eyes and let the water run over me, washing away the cold, the fear, the memory of the door locking behind me. When I emerged, my skin pink and warm, something inside me had shifted. Not healed, not fixed, but steadier. That's when I heard the shouting. It wasn't close, not right outside the door, but it carried through the quiet neighborhood, sharp and unmistakable. Evelyn was already at the window when I came into the living room. He's on the phone, she said calmly. I joined her, peering through the lace curtain. Across the yard, he stood in the driveway, his phone pressed to his ear, his free hand slicing through the air in agitated gestures. His face was red, his posture rigid. I didn't need to hear the words to know what was happening. The meeting had already started. He looks angry, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. He looks afraid, Evelyn corrected gently. I studied him more closely. She was right. Beneath the anger, there was something else now. A crack. A loss of certainty. He paced back and forth, stopped, shouted into the phone, then went very still. Minutes passed. Finally, he lowered the phone and stood there, staring at nothing. The man who had once filled every room with his presence now looked smaller, unsteady. A strange mix of emotions washed over me. Relief. Sadness. A grief I hadn't expected. That's the sound of control slipping, Evelyn said softly. It's never pretty. He eventually went inside his house, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows. I stepped back from the window, my legs trembling. What if he comes back? I asked. Evelyn placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. If he does, it will be different. How? He won't be shouting from a place of power anymore, she said. He'll be desperate. The words sent a chill through me, even in the warmth of the house. As evening approached, the sky darkened again, but the fear didn't return with it. Not fully. The night felt different now. Less threatening. Evelyn prepared dinner, and we ate together at the small table, the lamp casting a soft glow around us. You can stay as long as you need, she said, as if reading my thoughts. Days. Weeks. I hesitated. I can't impose. She smiled kindly. You're not imposing. You're recovering. After dinner, I sat with a blanket wrapped around my shoulders, listening to the quiet hum of the house. My phone, which I hadn't checked all day, buzzed suddenly on the table beside me. My heart jumped. I stared at it for a long moment before picking it up. Missed calls. Messages. I didn't open them. Evelyn noticed. You don't owe anyone an immediate response, she said gently. I know, I replied. And for the first time, I truly believed it. Later that night, as I lay on the couch again, sleep came easier. But my dreams were restless. Images flashed behind my closed eyes, doors slamming, snow falling, voices raised, and then suddenly silenced. I woke sometime after midnight to the sound of a car pulling into the driveway next door. I froze, listening. A door slammed. Footsteps staggered slightly. Evelyn appeared quietly at the end of the hall, already awake. He's home, she said softly. My chest tightened. Is he drunk? No, she replied. Just shaken. We stood together in the darkened living room, listening as muffled sounds drifted through the walls. Drawers opening. A chair scraping. A long, frustrated sigh. He's unraveling, Evelyn said quietly. And he doesn't know how to stop. I wrapped my arms around myself. I never wanted this. I know, she said. But wanting peace doesn't make you responsible for someone else's chaos. Her words settled deep. Eventually, the house next door went silent again. I returned to the couch, staring at the ceiling, thinking about all the nights I'd lain awake listening to that same silence, afraid of what might break it. This time, I wasn't alone. Morning came slowly. When sunlight filtered through the window, I felt something unexpected. Hope. It was fragile. Careful. But it was there. I didn't know exactly what the future held. I didn't know what choices I would make or how hard they would be. But I knew this much. The door that had been slammed in my face was no longer the only one in my life. And the woman I was becoming would never again stand barefoot in the cold, believing she deserved it. Morning didn't rush in. It arrived gently, like it was asking permission. Light slipped through the lace curtains in thin, golden lines, settling across the living room floor and the edge of the couch where I lay awake. I'd been up for a while, staring at the ceiling, listening to the quiet. Not the fragile quiet that waits to be shattered, but a deeper one. A steadier one. Evelyn was already awake. I could hear soft movement in the kitchen, the familiar rhythm of someone who knows her space well. Cups clinked. Water ran. The smell of coffee drifted through the house, warm and grounding. I sat up slowly, careful not to disturb the stillness. My body felt tired, but not heavy. For the first time in a long while, exhaustion didn't feel like defeat. I wrapped the blanket around my shoulders and walked toward the kitchen. Evelyn looked up and smiled when she saw me. Good morning, she said, as if this were any other day. As if the world hadn't tilted on its axis just hours before. Good morning, I replied. She slid a mug across the table toward me. I made it the way you drank it yesterday. I hadn't even realized she'd noticed. Thank you, I said, my voice quiet but steady. We sat together, sipping in companionable silence. Outside, a delivery truck rumbled past. Somewhere nearby, a door opened and closed. Life continued, indifferent to the private revolutions happening behind closed curtains. After a while, Evelyn spoke. "My son called again early this morning," she said. My fingers tightened slightly around the mug. "Is everything okay?" She nodded. "He wanted me to let you know that your husband won't be coming here today. Or for a while." I didn't ask why. I already knew. There were consequences, she continued evenly. Serious ones. Enough to make him think very carefully about his next move. A strange calm settled over me. Not triumph. Not relief exactly. Just clarity. What if he tries to talk to me? I asked. Evelyn met my eyes. That's your choice. Not his. The simplicity of the statement hit me harder than any argument ever had. Choice. The word felt unfamiliar on my tongue. I nodded slowly. I think. I need time. That's wise, she said. After breakfast, I showered again, this time taking my time. I dressed in clothes Evelyn had set out for me, soft, loose, comfortable. Looking at myself in the mirror, I noticed something subtle but important. My shoulders were no longer hunched. I looked like someone who was standing inside her own skin instead of bracing for impact. Mid-morning brought another knock at the door. My heart jumped, but it didn't race the way it had before. Fear rose, then settled. I waited. Evelyn glanced through the peephole, then opened the door calmly. It wasn't him. It was a woman about my age, holding a folder and wearing an expression that mixed professionalism with concern. I'm here to see you, she said, her gaze shifting briefly toward me. If that's okay. Evelyn stepped aside. It is. The woman introduced herself and explained why she was there. She spoke gently, carefully, like someone trained to navigate fragile moments. I won't pressure you, she said. I just want you to know your options. We sat at the table, papers spread out between us. Words like rights, safety, documentation floated through the air. None of it felt overwhelming. Not with Evelyn beside me, nodding quietly, grounding me with her presence. For the first time, I wasn't being told what to do. I was being asked what I wanted. After the woman left, I felt drained but lighter. You did well, Evelyn said. I didn't even cry, I said softly, surprised. She smiled. Strength doesn't always announce itself. The afternoon passed slowly. I made a phone call I'd been avoiding for years. Then another. Each one felt like reclaiming a small piece of myself. As the sun dipped lower, shadows stretched across the room. I found myself drawn to the window again, looking out at the house next door. The curtains were drawn tight. No movement. No noise. I didn't feel satisfaction at his silence. I felt distance. And that felt like freedom. That evening, my phone buzzed again. This time, I picked it up. One message. Not angry. Not loud. Just apologetic words stacked on top of each other, frantic and disorganized. Promises. Excuses. Regret. I read it once. Then I set the phone down without replying. Evelyn watched me carefully. How do you feel? I searched for the answer. Like. I don't need to explain myself anymore. She nodded. That's usually how it starts. Night fell quietly. No shouting. No slammed doors. Just the steady hum of the house and the occasional sound of wind against the windows. As I lay on the couch one last time, I realized something important. This wasn't an ending. It was a beginning that didn't need to announce itself loudly. I didn't know exactly where I would go from here. There would be hard days, difficult conversations, moments of doubt. But I also knew this. I would never again mistake endurance for love. I would never again confuse fear with loyalty. And I would never again stand in the cold, waiting for someone else to decide whether I was worthy of warmth. When I closed my eyes, sleep came easily. Not because everything was fixed, but because, for the first time, everything was finally mine to choose. The first night I spent fully awake, without fear tugging at the edges of my thoughts, felt strange. I lay on the couch, staring at the ceiling, listening to the steady rhythm of Evelyn's house breathing around me. Pipes clicked softly as the heat adjusted. Somewhere down the block, a siren wailed briefly and then faded. Ordinary sounds. Normal sounds. the kind I'd once learned to associate with safety before they were drowned out by raised voices and slammed doors. Sleep came and went in shallow waves. But when morning finally arrived, it brought something new with it. Resolve. I rose quietly, careful not to wake Evelyn, and stood by the window. Frost clung lightly to the grass outside, but the sky was clear. Pale blue. Open. The world didn't look threatening anymore. It looked wide. For years, my life had been reduced to small spaces. Small decisions. Small silences. I had learned how to shrink myself so well that I'd almost forgotten there were other ways to exist. Almost. Evelyn found me there a little later, already dressed, her hair neatly combed. "You're up early," she said. "I didn't want to waste the day," I replied. She studied me for a moment, then smiled. "That's a good sign." We ate breakfast together, unhurried. There was no tension at the table, no invisible pressure to perform or please. Just conversation. Simple things. The weather. A book she'd been reading. A neighbor who always fed the birds too much. Normal. Afterward, I gathered the few belongings I'd brought with me. Everything I owned fit into one small bag. Seeing it like that made my chest tighten, but it also clarified something important. I wasn't tied down by things. I was free to choose. "I think I'm ready," I said quietly. Evelyn looked up from the counter. "Ready for what?" "To move forward," I said. "Not back." She nodded, as if she'd been expecting that answer all along. "I'll help you however I can," she said. "But this part is yours." The day unfolded slowly but purposefully. Phone calls were made. Plans were sketched out, not in detail, but enough to give shape to the future. Each decision felt like laying one brick at a time in a foundation that was finally my own. In the afternoon, I stepped outside alone for the first time since that night. The air was cold but manageable. I wore proper shoes. A coat. My feet were firmly planted on solid ground. I walked past the house next door without stopping. The curtains remained drawn. The silence there felt hollow now, not powerful. Whatever storms were still brewing inside those walls were no longer mine to weather. As I reached the end of the block, I realized my hands weren't shaking. That surprised me more than anything. When I returned, Evelyn was waiting, sitting in her usual chair, sunlight warming her face. "How is it?" she asked. I felt lighter, I said, like I wasn't being pulled backward with every step. She smiled softly. "That's how you know you're doing the right thing." That evening, I packed the rest of my bag. I wouldn't be leaving immediately, but I wanted to be ready. Prepared. No more scrambling in the dark. My phone buzzed again as I zipped it closed. Another message. Longer this time. Carefully written. Apologies layered with explanations. A request to meet. To talk. To fix things. I read it slowly. Once I would have clung to those words. Turned them over in my mind, searching for hope between the lines. Believed that love meant giving endless chances, even when it cost me pieces of myself. Not anymore. I typed a response. Short. Clear. Calm. "I need space. Please don't contact me again." I stared at the screen for a long moment before pressing send. The message went through. And just like that, something I'd been carrying for years finally slipped from my shoulders. I expected guilt, or fear, or regret. Instead, I felt peace. Later that night, Evelyn and I sat together one last time, the house quiet around us. "You'll be okay," she said. Not as reassurance, but as a statement of fact. "I know," I replied. And I did. When I went asleep, it wasn't on the couch this time. Evelyn insisted I take the guest room. The bed was soft, the sheets clean and cool. As I lay there, I thought back to that moment in the cold. The darkness. The certainty that I was alone. I understood now that it wasn't the night that had changed everything. It was the moment I stepped inside warmth and allowed myself to believe I deserved it. The next morning, I left the house with my bag over my shoulder and my head held high. Evelyn hugged me at the door, her embrace firm and reassuring. "Don't forget," she said gently. "You're stronger than you think." "I won't," I promised. As I walked away, I didn't look back. There was nothing left for me there. Ahead of me was uncertainty, yes, but also possibility. Space to grow, to heal, to become someone who didn't measure her worth by how much pain she could endure. I didn't know exactly where my path would lead, but I knew this. I would never again confuse survival with living. And that was more than enough to begin.